The Miami Dolphins' methodical start to the tampering window continued on Tuesday with one new addition and two familiar faces back for more. We're covering that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Legal tampering continuing on Tuesday. Dolphins got an early start. Was on the radio with Joe Rose this morning from about 8 to 8:20, and you had Jevon Holland left. The Dolphins signed another safety, Ifeatu Melifonwu, who we're going to talk about here to start today's show. A little bit later in the morning, Quinton Bell and Elijah Campbell back off of last year's team on one-year contract extensions. We're going to get into all of that in addition to some breadcrumbs, if you will. So let's start with Ifeatu Melifonwu. Who is coming off of his rookie contract. He was a member of the 2021 NFL draft class from the university, from Syracuse University. He played cornerback for them, supersized defensive back. I think that's the first thing that when you consider the size profile, 6'2.5", legit 6'2.5", 205 pounds coming out of Syracuse. 78.5-inch wingspan, which amongst NFL defensive backs to come through the NFL Combine since 2000 is 87th percentile. It's a long, big player, and he's explosive. If you remember the name Melifonwu, his brother Obi came out as a defensive back. I believe he set the broad jump record at the Combine as a cornerback out of UConn. And was highly regarded. And the second Melifonwu ended up getting drafted in the third round by the Detroit Lions. At pick, I believe it was 102 overall was where he ends up getting drafted. But the athletic profile here, 41.5-inch vert, 11-foot 2-inch broad jump. I mean, these are 95th percentile plus athletic tests for a guy who's a supersized player. Now, he didn't end up playing corner. He ends up landing at safety. And his first 2 years in the league was relatively quiet. He had a breakout year in 2023 in which he played in all 17 games and took significant snaps on special teams. It was close to 200 snaps on special teams and close to 400 snaps on defense. Injuries have been the thing, so we're going to do the say the line Bart thing from The Simpsons meme. This is a player that has some durability questions that the Dolphins just continue to seem to not care about the injury risk mitigation that comes with putting together a roster. They are shopping on a budget. This was a one-year deal worth about $4 million for Ifeatu Melifonwu. And when you turn on the tape, I was familiar enough with Melifonwu from watching Detroit for Locked On NFL Scouting and familiarizing yourself. You have to know the league. Right? If you're going to do a national show, you have to be familiar with the dynamics on all the teams and the storylines for all the teams. So Melifonwu, you knew he had made the emergence as a year 3 player and looked like he was ready to really take a big time step, but only played in a handful of games this past year. Obviously did not get a contract renewal, but at 1 year, $4 million, that's a dollar amount that probably gives you some level of indication that this is a player that's going to be contending for a starting role. Here's the good news, because good portion of fans probably heard the first 90 seconds and said, well, same old, same old. But when you watch him on film, and in Detroit between Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, they have a pretty dynamic pair of safeties, young safeties there. So Melifonwu had been a complementary piece the past 2 seasons when he was on the field. Brian Branch obviously can live down in the nickel. You can do a lot with him, but you can do a lot with Melifonwu as well. He's lived predominantly on the second level of the defense, whether that's as a sub package linebacker, nickel player, or a deep half safety that spins and rotates down and gets down into the intermediate area of the field. He shines there. You see good reps fitting the run, negotiating blocks, getting off of blocks, tackling from depth, which was something that this team really didn't do a great job of last year with either of the safeties that they had as their starting safeties. I think this is an upgrade in that regard. I think the skill set, obviously, this is a much more dynamic and explosive player than what you had in Jordan Poyer as a late-stage career Jordan Poyer type of player. Melifonwu showcases better transitional stuff at safety. Now, if you played him at corner and you asked him to play on an island and isolate and play press man or be in the face of guys, I think that probably is not the pathway to success, which is why I'm not surprised he made the conversion early to safety. But he takes good transitions. He's got good explosion out of his drop step when he stops to collect himself out of a pedal and drive on throws. It's just been a body of work type of issue, and part of that challenge has been Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. Some of that challenge has been Melifonwu's own durability issues, and the early portion of his career was the developmental curve of being a corner and switching over and playing safety. I like this bet a lot. Now, you place too many high-risk bets, you're going to get burned in some spots, and that's the concern that I think a lot of Dolphins fans have right now. And you're right to feel that way because of how the last several seasons have ended. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Melifonwu is going to play 17 games. But it's for me, I go back to that phrase about young and hungry. I think Larry Borum qualifies as the same thing. There were some inconsistencies with where he was asked to play. He was played at guard, he was played at tackle, and he was back at guard, then he was back at tackle again. The regression amidst the offensive infrastructure, you watch that tape. There's some overlap from these NFC North editions where Melifonwu and Borum are on the field at the same time as I'm watching Melifonwu's tape today. And just Chicago structurally a disaster. I mean, from a play design, from a protection calls standpoint, they were a disaster. And getting Borum and Melifonwu off of rookie contracts as young guys that have talent that can be extrapolated and projected into this scheme, these are bets to place at not high risk. And we still, for the life of us, don't know the Larry Borum contract terms. But there is a lot to like. You have to fight the complacency, though. There's a lot to do. You have yet to really address the interior defensive line. You need another corner. You probably need another safety. I wouldn't feel comfortable with Melifonwu, Patrick McMorris, and Elijah Campbell, and calling it a day there and then seeing if you draft somebody. You probably need at least one more offensive lineman of sub capacity. You'd like to add some depth to the skill player groups. There's a lot to do, right? And it's very easy to say, well, we checked this box. We got these guys. Like, let's move on to the next thing. But the competition element of it is the other thing that really struck me as being very important that this team needs to swing the fences for. Is to get a lot of young competition, young, hungry competition guys that have an edge and have something to prove and are looking for big payday opportunities, and they want to earn it on the field. I think this is the kind of player, Melifonwu, who just came off his rookie contract. This is his first opportunity to choose his destination and choose a place that makes sense for him in the same way that was applicable for Aaron Brewer and Jordan Brooks last year. I'm not saying he's going to be that kind of signing, but that's the correlation between the path that those players were on and the path that this player's on. I like Melifonwu. I think he's got a lot of talent, and we'll see what else they choose to complement him with in the safety room. One player we know is complimenting him in the safety room is Elijah Campbell, who is back, along with Quinton Bell. We're going to get into those guys next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you could save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable than ever. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. It's not just a matter of major crises in your life either. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a sounding board to talk about all the things that are going on in your life and make sure you're properly calibrated. Your well-being is well worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Two familiar faces back, big-time role players for the Dolphins. Quinton Bell is one, and I know that was one that everybody was a little surprised when it came out that he wasn't going to be getting a restricted free agent tender by the team after playing significant snaps. He played 372 snaps on special teams for the Dolphins last year and then 257 snaps on defense. You're talking over 600 total snaps played. It's a big-time workload. And he played last year for minimum salary, so it was six figures. It wasn't seven figures. He's a guy who really had not collected that amount of tenure in the league as far as playing time opportunities. It was 2020, he played in 5 games. 2022, he then played in 4 games. He didn't get another opportunity to play on game days until the Dolphins had played in 17 games. Now, do you want him starting? No. Should he have to start with your situation you have right now? No, especially as the Dolphins apparently are kicking the tires on other pass rushers in addition to presumably having a healthy Jalen Phillips and a healthy Bradley Chubb and having Chop Robinson and having Grayson Murphy available to you as an undrafted free agent who popped in a big-time way in the preseason and training camp. So I think this is a good player at a good value. If you were going to put a restricted free agent tender on Quinton Bell, it would have been at minimum a $3.2 million salary for Quinton Bell. Instead, the Dolphins opt to not put a restricted free agent tender on him. And then before the league year formally opened tomorrow, they get a 1-year contract extension done and effectively give him a 50% raise. It's a 1-year, $1.5 million contract, which is what we had budgeted for in the offseason blueprint. I think that's a win for Quinton Bell. It's a win for the Dolphins. The Dolphins don't tender him for no reason. And it's not like you could tender him and then say, hey, let's negotiate a contract. We're going to do 1 for 1.5. He's like, the tender is 3.2. I'm not signing I'm not taking anything but the tender price. So I think this is a win-win scenario for both teams, and Quinton Bell having an opportunity to kind of use last year as what I thought was a sturdy role player on the team. See what else he can use to springboard off of that into the next opportunity he has after 2025. Then you have Elijah Campbell, who has been with the team now it's been quite some time. And he's back on a $1.9 million 1-year contract. Now, he's another core special teams guy. He's been with the team since 2021. And in 2021, he played exclusively special teams for 133 snaps. And then it was 290 snaps on special teams in 22. And then it was 301 snaps on special teams in 2023. And then it was 290 snaps again on special teams in 2024. Over that entire course of time, he's played less than 280 snaps on defense. But he's played 4 years worth and over 1,000 snaps on special teams. Minimum salaries about $900K, so it's a $1 million investment versus your 51st player being a minimum salary player to bring him back into the fray and have him potentially be a familiar piece who was in the system last year, and maybe he's competing with Patrick McMorris, and it seemed like the team liked him. I don't see a lot of downside to this addition, and it's certainly not preventing me from adding another starting safety to the room. Now, this came out while I was recording from Ian Rappaport. Justin Reid is off the board. So if you were a Dolphins fan hoping to see Justin Reid added to the roster, he signed a 3-year, $31.5 million contract with the Saints, who just refused to do the obvious thing, which is restack their deck. You want to know what salary cap hell looks like? Don't look at Miami. Don't look at shopping on a budget. Go look at what the Saints are doing. You want to know what salary cap hell looks like. But nevertheless, they still found a way to make it work and sign Justin Reid. So that will not be a player they're adding to complement what is now a safety room of Ifeatu Melifonwu, Elijah Campbell, and Patrick McMorris as the 3 names. I think you add a starting caliber vet, and then you look to draft at some point another starting caliber rookie contender safety at some point in the first 5 rounds of the 2025 NFL draft. And you do that and you say, okay, well, Melifonwu, we know there's some durability questions here. We obviously have another veteran player. Who's going to win the competition between McMorris and Campbell and potentially a rookie to be the third safety, which, go back to Baltimore, was a big deal within the defensive system. Baltimore had, whether it was Geno Stone, Marcus Williams, and Kyle Hamilton, like they had 3 guys that were prominent contributors. So just because you've added X and Y doesn't mean that you can't add A, B, or C plus D in the safety room. Now, with the financial commitment here with Campbell, I would expect, based on his body of work and what he's been for the Dolphins for the past 4 years, I'd probably pencil him in to be a safety 3 or a safety 4. And be a special teams contributor for you at a high level. Now, the question is, how deep do you want that room to go versus the corners? Do you want to carry 5 safeties? A lot of teams don't. That's the numbers game that you'll have to sort out when it comes down to figuring out the competitions that you are going to be fostering in a lot of your rooms, which is healthy competition for a team that is in the midst of a bit of a transition. Not a transition like San Francisco, but a transition nonetheless for the Dolphins. And I know there were some fans that had questions about it's a high-stress year. There's a lot of pressure to win. Do they empty the chamber? Do they say 2026, forget about it, we're going to push full send here? They're not doing that. They're not doing that. And I think maybe that's a point of frustration for some fans, but I think it's the smart business thing to do. And I think the checks and balances element of how the Dolphins are run is shining right now, and in that they are not getting caught up in the rat, or they did not yesterday, and in the first 36 hours get caught up in the rat race of spending like crazy. But they have shown interest in spending on bigger dollar players, which is where we're going to finish with today's episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today, an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction, file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Couple of breadcrumbs on what the Dolphins have been looking to do with some of their other dollars in the first 2 days of the tampering window. One of which was a player that was on the roster last year, and another one who has some familiarity with Mike McDaniel. It's been reported, courtesy of some of the members of the Dolphins beat, including Omar Kelly, that the Dolphins were negotiating with Dre Greenlaw, who ultimately signed a contract pushing $12 million per season with the Denver Broncos yesterday. They agreed to terms. They didn't sign. Tomato. But Dre Greenlaw, being a player, obviously you'd be pairing with Jordan Brooks, is a big-time addition that it seemed like they were very interested in. I know from some of the conversations I've had behind the scenes that there was legitimate interest there. That was not just a phone call and hang up. There was some effort to try to find something that made sense for both sides. Denver ends up, just like they did with Talanoa Hufanga, they come up over the top with a really aggressive price point, and they seal the deal and get it done. The Dolphins opting to show restraint in that process. They could have matched that offer if they wanted to. Who knows how high Denver would have gone, but it was a player that they were interested in at a dollar amount that would have been a competitive dollar amount within the linebacker market. The other player, according to some reports that came out this morning was after Jevon Holland signed his contract with the New York Giants for 3 years and $45.3 million, so $15.1 million to sign with the New York Giants. Jevon Holland reportedly was another player the Dolphins were in connection with throughout the day yesterday to potentially try to re-sign and bring back on the roster, which I find interesting because, that's you knew going in if you were the Dolphins, that was not going to be a cheap contract because he allegedly, according to NFL Network's Cam Wolf yesterday, Holland at the beginning of the season had turned down a $14 million per year offer from the Dolphins before the season started. So you knew what that price point was going to look like. So if you legitimately were, as reports are indicating, in connection with Holland throughout the day yesterday and showing interest in bringing him back, it does tell me that there's a willingness to spend if you find the right player at the right price point to spend on. Now, I don't know how much of that is left. Will Fries came off the board. He signed in Minnesota. Could this be a Dalvin Tomlinson type situation where the Dolphins have a needed defensive tackle? Tomlinson getting moved on from what he was in Cleveland last, I believe. There's just not a lot of players that are left on the board that have expectations for high-end salaries that are going to make a lot of sense. Joey Bosa's been reported. Sounds like that may be imminent with San Francisco. But that's another pass rusher that they're looking at in the midst of a room that is getting the names from last year back and presumably healthy for the start of the season. How long they stay healthy, we'll say the line, Bart. How long they stay healthy is the big mystery. But Draymond Jones, maybe. Like if I'm going to put my creative thinker hat on, I'm looking at names that have expectations for higher dollar amounts that are still out there. Draymond Jones was cut by Seattle and coming off a contract in which he was getting 17 per. Do I think they'd pay him 17 per? No, I don't. But I certainly think it's a name to kind of earmark and watch. If they're interested in pass rushers, Zadarius Smith, the Lions moved on from him. Is that a name that they show some interest in? Would they show interest in another potential starting offensive guard? If Brandon Scherf is out there, would they want a Tyreek Hill short-term pivot if they really wanted to move on, like Brandon Cooks? Larry Ogunjobi, I know we mentioned yesterday. They're going to need a corner. Is that I'm just looking at, I know there was some potential interest with Christian Fulton, and he's off the board now. He's agreed to terms on a contract that was about $10 million per season. But is that an Asante Samuel Jr. spot? If I'm just going to put it through the mind and the lens of they've been looking at some upper middle class potential pairings to find who's left that would make some sense for them. Those are some names that come to mind, but I do think it's particularly interesting that this team, for all of the restraint and discipline that they have shown to operate within a budget, and a lot of the budgets for players that they've committed to are relatively equal to some of the budgets that we had in the blueprint. And we went over that last Friday. Not the names, forget about the names because the market went crazy. But the budget. We had budgeted a 3-year, $24 million contract for a guard. They signed James Daniels to 3 years, $24 million. We had budgeted a safety, it was Julian Blackmon, on a 1-year deal worth $4 million. They signed Melifonwu to a 1-year contract worth $4 million. You had a quarterback with an annual average salary of $6 million as a backup quarterback on the budget for the blueprint. They signed Zach Wilson with a base salary of $6 million. So that AAV was exactly the same. Quinton Bell, we had down for 1 year, $1.5 million. He signed a contract extension today, or agreed to a contract extension today. It was 1 year, $1.5 million. So the budget is fairly in line with what the projected blueprint budget was. And if that is a point of emphasis to kind of recalibrate and show some discipline and bring that cash over cap ratio back down a little bit, until you offload a big contract like a Tyreek Hill, and with all of the money that he's due at $27 million, if you even do that, you are looking for right fits at right prices, finding the right people / players to pay the right kind of money to. But they have shown some willingness and appetite to spend. They're just not going to throw money at people, which in the face of what they face this offseason, I think is daunting and risky, but also admirable. We'll see if they find one that fits. We'll see if they find a shoe that fits that's a bigger dollar amount. But as of at least me sitting down and recording this, and it is 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we haven't found one yet. But the Dolphins yesterday made their moves around this time and later yesterday. So we'll see what happens. And if we get some movement, we'll probably do another show tonight, and then we'll do it all again tomorrow. But that's going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. I am Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Tuesday. I'll be back again soon. Who knows when, with some more Dolphins content. Hope to see you then. Go Fins.